Hi, I'm Bob Weir with another interview of People in the News in North Texas. My guest today is Jake Collier, who is running for the Republican nomination to the Texas House seat in the 65th District, which includes major parts of Louisville and Carrollton in Denton County. Jake is, this is like an official announcement that he will be running. And I want to thank you for being here, Jake.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bob.
Let's begin with the current state rep, by the way, in the 65th District is Michelle Beckley, one of the Democrats that fled the state recently to deny a quorum on the voting rights bill in the legislature. Yesterday, she announced that she's running for Congress in the 24th District against Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne. So far, no Democrat has announced a run for her seat, so you're running for an open seat now. All right, how do you feel about the voting rights bill that has already passed the Senate? Does it restrict voting rights?
No, not at all. This bill, the whole movement of this bill, the whole election integrity movement has been to secure our voting process. So all of these games that the Democrats are playing is just nonsense. There's so many different things that have been refuted in so many of these bills that have taken away all the arguments that the Democrats have been able to even put forth, so much so that they've had to abandon the state and go to D.C. for safety and cover with Vice President Biden and Kamala.
And it seems like the biggest stumbling block for the Democrats is that the bill requires that you have ID to vote. Right? You have to have identification to vote, which seems like a no-brainer, but in politics anything is possible. All right, next I'll ask you, it's obvious that Texas is facing a crisis at the border. In your opinion, is Governor Abbott doing everything in his power to stop the flow of illegal migrants?
Well, so I think that there always is more that can be done. But from a federal point of view, I think that we have a lot of these issues with the federal government that has, some of these Fed agents down there, some of their hands are tied. Some of our law enforcement, their hands are tied. So for me, I don't know how he bridges that gap with the president and with that administration to sort of have our own, work around our own jurisdiction at the border. Because we have to. I mean, we can't have these people coming in, as collectively as they are and slowly over time and just building up a population in 2 to 3 years that is, mismanaging California.
Well, what about his powers as far as closing the border? Does the governor have that right?
I think he does, but again, I don't want to get campaigning against the governor, but the governor he's campaigning too. So if the governor closes the border, if he goes too far right, if he goes too far left, he can look weak, he can look too strong. So I think that.
But is that what we really care about? Whether he looks weak or strong? Isn't the purpose of his executive position as the governor of the state to do what's best for the state?
I agree. I agree completely.
I mean, so that's and I've heard that he has plans that he might be doing it, he could be doing it. I don't know, but certainly I think if this mass migration continues, something has to be done. I don't see the Democrats are going to do anything,
No.
and the Biden administration certainly isn't going to stop it. So that's my editorial commentary on it.
Absolutely.
All right, how about this? What is your position on critical race theory?
Yeah, so critical race theory is bad. It is terrible. It is at its core a Marxist ideology, a Marxist thought process. Critical race theory is what global warming is to climate change. So you take race out, it's critical theory. Critical theory is a root of Karl Marx. It goes back all the way to the mid-1800s to the early 1930s when the Socialist Party really started to come out of the Great Depression and some of the things that were going on in the world. And so through that thought process, through that identity politics, class warfare was developed. In Marxism, you have the oppressor versus the oppressed. Critical race theory, you have an oppressor versus the oppressed. You get climate change. The oppressor is man to the earth, right? So we have these different classes, different warfare styles that Marxism has brought to the light And now we're seeing it indoctrinated in our school systems. Colleges have been using it for years, and it's just something that's so cancerous and deadly. And that was really one of the more significant things that I think that we need to be educating people on. We need to be sitting down at our coffee shops and talking about this, talking about how we don't need this. We need to go to our school board meetings. We need to go to our council. All those different places we need to be to let people know that this type of thinking, this type of ideology has consequences, so much so that it's pushed an entire race narrative to pit black against white when there are so many different other ethnicities in the world. It's never going to be black and white. It's not the way it should be. It's this Marxist thought process that has invaded our country, and now we're seeing the fruit of it, basically.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a tactic of the left, and it's as old as dirt. You know, it's the divide and conquer. This nation's being divided like it hasn't since the Civil War, and you know, this is one of this critical race theory is one of the plans at division.
Yeah.
All right, recently Senate Republicans passed a bill that would restrict transgender student athletes from participating on sports teams that do not correspond with their sex at birth. If you were a House member, would you vote for that bill?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, we have to, if you're a boy, you're a boy. You should play with the boys. If you're a girl, you're a girl. You should play with the girls. And it should, if we're going to have that lesson at the collegiate, the high school level, I mean, you know, it's got to be practiced all the way to the top. So, absolutely. I just think that it's one of those things that you can legislate so much, but you can't change the culture. And I met a really smart guy in Austin. He's works in the legislative department, and one of the things that he said is, you know, politics is downstream from culture. So whatever is going on in culture, the political stuff, the legislation, you know, almost wants to take up for what's going on in the culture. When, you know, culturally, we have to look at some of those relationships with those students, the way that they're developing early on. I mean, you have to look at some of these serious mental issues, you know, at an early age. If kids have gender dysphoria, all those different things, those are real. The fact that they're a man and they want to be a woman, that's not reality. But those early stages of confusion and all that stuff, we've got to meet them where they're at an early age, so we can change our culture before it gets bad later on, you know.
Sure, and it has the potential to take women out of sports.
100%.
Because how are they going to compete? So yeah, I certainly think this is another one of those common sense ideas. All right, let me see. Let's just briefly tell the people who may not know, what's the job of a Texas state rep?
Yeah, so for a state representative, you have to take part in the legislative process, obviously. So, you know, the way that the House and the Senate works in the Texas legislature, if you have a legislator in the House part of the chamber, you have them send a bill to the Senate. The Senate has to verify that through all their process. Senate goes back to the House and so forth. And when you're at a federal level, things go upwards and they don't go backwards. So when you're a House member, you're constantly writing legislation that's always going to try to get it to the Lieutenant Governor's desk so that it can get to the governors, right? But one of the main things that you do as a legislator is, you know, obviously represent the needs of your people. So in the time that you're not in session, you have to be really figuring out what people are, you know, valuing, what type of stuff that they really want worked on, so that whenever you're in Austin, you can spend time with your staff, you can spend time with the other people that are in, you know, completely different districts and put your heads together, get some legislation together.
We're going to be wrapping up in a minute. Are there any other issues that you want to mention that are important to Texas going forward?
Yeah, so the power grid.
Power grid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we need to address some of those issues a little bit more. We have a market issue. We subsidize a lot of our energy, you know, especially with wind and solar and a lot of that stuff. And I think we need to open up the markets, make a little bit more competition, so that we can have a little bit more strengthenings. People can be competing and not getting, you know, complacent and dull that they've got some business in Texas.
Exactly. We don't want to go through that again.
No, not at all.
We went to recently. Okay, there, so far, I think there's only one other candidate that we'll be announcing, and that's Kranda Thimish, and she ran last time. And so I think we've covered all the topics. The time is about run out now, so I want to thank you, Jake, for being here, and good luck in the campaign.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for watching.